I just want to remind you guys how crazy it is to me that we are currently living within this Godzilla kaiju renaissance that we are in right now. Because when I was a kid, I mean, Godzilla was really hard to find to begin with. You had to search for the VHS tapes. Maybe TNT ran their marathon every once in a while. But even as a little kid, I didn't really know other kids that were into Godzilla that much or as much as I was or even cared about it even in the slightest. And then the big Godzilla movie when I was a kid was the Roland Emmerich, 1998 Godzilla, which, is not a bad movie per se, but just it's not Godzilla. And so that's what everybody thought Godzilla was back then. And then after 2004, there was a decade-long gap of just nothing, just completely barren landscape, the dark ages, no Godzilla material whatsoever. And it's so crazy to me because within the last 10 years, from 2014 to now in 2024, there's been such an overabundance of Godzilla content, it's even hard to keep up with. Between the MonsterVerse itself, between Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Minus One, the Netflix movies, Godzilla Singular Point, like all of these things have come out within the last 10 years. It's actually kind of crazy. And on top of that, there has now been a live action TV series, Monarch Legacy of Monsters, taking place within the legendary MonsterVerse featuring Godzilla. So wait a second. There's a live action show with Godzilla and with Kurt Russell? What the hell is going on, man? So I finally got around to watching it, and it took me a while because it is only streaming exclusively on Apple TV, and I really didn't want to have to get another streaming service because I just didn't want to do that. But I got the free trial, I watched it, and now I'm canceling it, you motherfuckers. So yeah, I'm sorry it took me so long to get around to watching it, but I figured maybe some of you out there that follow the Godzilla stuff that I do would be curious to hear my thoughts on it, and well, here they are. But first of all, I need to tell you guys that I have a bias when it comes to Godzilla because of all things, of all media that is out there, I think I have the biggest rose-tinted glasses effect when it comes to Godzilla media because to me, Godzilla is just this thing that keeps this childhood wonder and whimsy within me because it's mostly been beaten out of me to death as I've gotten older, and it's so diluted now that it barely exists. And every time I go into an existential crisis, I have to go back and rewatch the old Showa Godzilla films to just remind me about what joy there could be in life because it's just so slim, and I just need that Godzilla in my life to keep me going, okay? So when it comes to Godzilla, I really, really give the series the benefit of the doubt, I think, more than any other series. Now, there are some Godzilla movies I don't like, but very, very few. And even a lot of the bad ones I love just for either nostalgia or just because I just appreciate the silliness of it. So there is definitely an inherent bias with me personally when it comes to Godzilla that might not be in a more generic review from a more just kind of casual viewer. So I want to put that out there. I also recognize before going into the show that it is a TV show, and even though the budget seems to be fine for what they were doing, and when the kaiju show up, I actually think the CG is really good, like shockingly good for when they do show up, but obviously it is very few and far between. It is a 10-episode season, and I believe if you compile all of the Godzilla scenes within the entire season, it's maybe 5 minutes out of 10 episodes that are like 45 minutes to 50 minutes a piece. So you're not going to get very much Godzilla. It's not a series about kaiju fighting each other. It's not going to be on the same level as the movies. But I was very impressed with the CGI and with the monsters when they actually do show up in the show. And I think that when they do show up, it has very profound impact and importance within the show. It's mostly about the human characters, and you got to be okay with that. And that's why I really wouldn't recommend this to anybody that's kind of more of a casual viewer, I guess. I think that if you are invested in the current ongoing MonsterVerse, particularly with the lore that it sets up, I think this is going to be a really good show to check out. And I also think that if you're just a Godzilla fan in general, well, you get to see a live-action show that takes place in a world where Godzilla exists. That's crazy. I think the only other live-action Godzilla was or TV show was when he showed up in Zone Fighter, like back in the day, man. So, yeah, just wild times we're living in. But I also recognize the faults in the show, of which there are many, mostly with the dialogue and a lot of the main cast. So, basically, the show itself, this was a really cool idea that I like that it did. I'll kind of give my overall thoughts, and then I'll get into spoilers and more details as the review goes on. But just in a general sense, kind of without spoilers, the show takes place 1 year after Godzilla 2014. So it actually takes place in 2015, and the main character, Kate, was there during Godzilla's attack in San Francisco during that movie, during the bridge scene, and she was actually one of the teachers on the school bus that we actually saw in 2014. So I thought that was really cool how it tied it in there. And this was in this world at this time, which we haven't seen because there was a 5-year gap in between the 2014 movie and Godzilla King of the Monsters. So this is kind of that period of time that we didn't get to see, where there was only this one Godzilla attack before the monsters were everywhere on Earth, like in King of the Monsters. Now it's like this is a natural disaster event, or it's a big historic moment, and they even call it G-Day, which I thought was kind of, I mean, simplistic but clever. I liked it. So G-Day happened in 2014. It was like this big disastrous event, and people are kind of recovering from that and kind of dealing with the fact that, oh yeah, there was a giant fucking monster in San Francisco a few months ago. But essentially you have two parallel storylines going on in this show that are happening at different points in time, and it's really clever the way that they did it because in the main timeline you have this character Kate, who was during the bridge attack in Godzilla 2014, and she finds out that her father had this estranged separate family in Japan, so she has this half-brother named Kentaro, and they kind of go on a quest to figure out what their father was up to, whether he's dead or whether he disappeared, and what he was searching for and what he was doing involved with this kaiju stuff. So it's basically an unraveling mystery to figure out what their father was actually up to, and them kind of like, coming to terms with being estranged and all of that. And I will say that main cast, there's another character too named May that is their friend. They were the weakest aspect of the show for me, and it's not that they were bad actors or anything, it's just that the other storyline is so much more engaging and so much more interesting than just these estranged siblings searching for their dad and, going from place to place and trying to figure it out. It just didn't work as well for me, where the other storyline connects to this one because they meet up with Kurt Russell's character. Kurt Russell is in this show? What the hell, man? He's always been one of my favorite actors. Fucking awesome. And he's far and away the best actor in the show, but he's got the experience, he's got the longevity. He knows what he's doing. And so they meet up with his character that helps him out during this mystery, but he also kind of has his own agenda, and a lot of that is slowly revealed with the flashbacks, where we see a younger version of Kurt Russell's character that's actually played by his real-life son, Wyatt Russell, which I thought was a really clever way to do it. Instead of trying to do the de-aging thing or something like that, they actually just used his son, and he does a really great job. I don't think I've seen Wyatt Russell in anything else, so I don't know if this is just the way that he acts or if it's just the way that he acted in this show. But I think the way that he speaks, the way his voice sounds, his mannerisms, I think he captured his father perfectly, and it worked actually surprisingly well. Now, his story unfolds because he is with two other characters, a scientist named Keiko, and actually the younger version of the character that John Goodman played in Kong Skull Island. And it is about them discovering the kaiju for the very first time and kind of laying the groundwork for what Monarch would become. And with their storyline, we actually get to see some things that have been talked about before. They were actually present during the flashback scene where they used the H-bomb on Godzilla that's shown in the opening credits of 2014. And I think probably the best thing this show does is create this cohesiveness within the entire MonsterVerse, because obviously when Gareth Edwards made his first movie, he wasn't thinking about the Hollow Earth or, all of that kind of crazy shit that kind of came as the sequels went along. Well, Monarch kind of dives into that, and it actually creates this cohesive line between all of the lore that's been established throughout all these movies and makes it make a little bit more sense, or makes it feel like that was the plan from the get-go, when obviously it wasn't. But their storyline in the past is so engaging and so interesting, it almost makes you wish that entire show took place in the past, or just with Kurt Russell's character. Now, I'm not saying the younger cast is bad. I think they were all fine as their performances go, but it's just that their story was not as engaging to me. And as far as the storyline goes, it's a little bit hard to talk about without delving into spoilers because it is a mystery show. So every episode, more information is revealed, more lore of the past and how it relates to the present is revealed, more information as to where Kate and Kentaro's father is and what he's up to, and where Monarch currently is. And it's kind of their slow reveal to the world that it's an organization that exists that keeps tabs on all these monsters and what is going on with them. So overall, I will say that I think that there is enough good stuff in here to keep you engaged, although I would say that there are some faults that are going to bring it down for probably a lot of people. I think number one is just that the main cast is it's just like, they're just okay. And also, a lot of the dialogue is really cheesy. Now, Godzilla movies are obviously not far removed from being corny and cheesy, right? That's part of the reason why we love them. But a lot of that is offset with seeing a lot of the cool monster stuff. But in this show, since you only get maybe, you know, a minute or two of screen time of monsters per episode, well, you know, a lot of it is really focused on the actors and their performances carrying the show. Some of them do it better than others, but a lot of the times the dialogue is just really corny, really cheesy, and there's also a lot of expository dialogue kind of explaining scientific things, and so like if you're not completely invested in that, that's not going to work. But there is also, on the flip side of that, there is also emotional stuff that is happening with the characters and an almost kind of love triangle that is happening with some of them. That I know that sounds cheesy and corny, but it actually works really, really well. I know that sounds corny, but it actually works really, really well because it's subtle, it's not overdone, and it's not in your face. It's just kind of like a subtle thing that's happening between the three characters in the past, but it works better than you'd think it would. I think the show has a couple of really big highlight moments, some in particular where Godzilla does show up, but I think the best thing about the show is the final two episodes and what they were able to do that, which I don't want to go into without spoilers, but I think that it builds up pretty well, but when it gets to those last two episodes, I thought they were great. I thought the first episode was pretty good, kind of like getting you into it, also giving the flashback of the bridge scene, you know, in Godzilla 2014. And then there's kind of particular moments I like throughout the series after that, but then those final two episodes, I actually think were legitimately really good. And there's a lot of emotion that happens in the final episode, which I'll get to in the spoilers, that actually kind of got to me. I was like, damn, this is a pretty emotional moment, as well as the climactic Godzilla scene in the last episode, which was legitimately awesome. But basically, I would only recommend this show if you're interested and invested in the lore of the MonsterVerse, because I don't know if it's really going to hit with people that are not kaiju fans to begin with or fans of the MonsterVerse. It's probably not something that's going to work for everybody. However, I will also say that I don't think you need to have any prior knowledge of the MonsterVerse to watch this. I think it works fine on its own as just its own show, because all these characters you're essentially meeting for the first time. Even the guy that plays John Goodman's character, I mean, you don't need... This takes place before Skull Island, you know, because the flashbacks are in the 50s, Skull Island's in the 70s, so you don't need to know that to watch this. So I think that you could watch it as a first-time viewer. I just don't know if you would be as invested if you don't care about the kaiju stuff. All right, but now I'm going to get into the spoiler section. I'm going to get a little bit more specific about the show, so if you don't want to know all that stuff, go ahead and leave the video now. But yeah, let's get into it, man. So basically, the big thing that I want to talk about is how they incorporate Hollow Earth into this series. Now, Hollow Earth, of course, may seem like a pretty silly idea, but it actually works pretty well. I think actually in this series, maybe even more so than it does in the movies, because it does give you an explanation as to where these kaiju come from, because as established in Godzilla 2014, you know, this was the first time humanity has really experienced this, other than that brief moment in the 50s where Godzilla showed up and they used the H-bomb on him. So you have to explain where all the monsters come from. And I also think it's a nice little throwback, because in the early Showa Godzilla films, they had Monster Island, which just was this island where, you know, the monsters just kind of hung out, right? And so, you know, the Hollow Earth to me is kind of the modern version of Monster Island. We can't just have an island. We have Skull Island, but we got to have more than that. So Hollow Earth is kind of a good excuse to just say, hey, that's where the monsters come from. When we need a monster, we can just pull it out of Hollow Earth. It works for me. I don't know. It's simple, but I don't need anything more complex than that. But they do go into a lot more detail about the mechanics of it here, and what has happened, throughout the course of time, and what Kurt Russell's character actually went through to try to stop this, which I thought was the best part of the show. The whole family drama about the siblings trying to find their dad, I mean, it was a good excuse to get them to meet up with Kurt Russell and have them all go on the adventure together. But man, I'm sorry, I might sound, really negative about it, but I just really didn't care about those characters as much. I don't know if it's just if it was too much of like forced family drama or what it was for me, but it just didn't work as well as, the other stuff that was going on in the show. But regardless, back to my original point. So they basically set up this premise that there are all these kind of tunnels throughout the entire world that link to Hollow Earth in some way. And this was something that was discovered, and they even sent people down there, including Kurt Russell, who had the younger version of him, Wyatt Russell. I should just use the character's name, Lee Shaw. So they sent Shaw down there when he was younger, and what you found out was that he entered this realm where there was like this time displacement, and I was a little bit confused on this because they've never mentioned this in the movies, because characters, especially in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, they can go back and forth to Hollow Earth pretty casually. And in this show, they established that while he was down there, years and years passed up here when he was only down there for a couple of days. So he essentially missed 2 decades of his life because he was trapped down there. But they do explain that it's in a slightly different area, or maybe not all the way down to Hollow Earth, that they weren't able to navigate the tunnels properly, and so they kind of ended up in this area. I don't know. It kind of works for me, but at the same time, it is a little bit confusing because it was something that's never been brought up or established in the movies. But it works very well for the final episode, because essentially he went down there to try to find Keiko, and he never was able to find her. And when he goes back in the final 2 episodes, unexpectedly, he does find her, but now he's grown much older, and she's only been down here in her time for like 50 days or something. But on the surface level, she's been gone like 40, 50 years. So as you can imagine, that's a very difficult thing to try to reconcile, that everybody you knew and loved have gone on. It's basically like a time displacement thing, kind of like in Interstellar, where they're on a different planet and they're moving at a different rate of speed. And so the time moves differently. And that's kind of what's happening here. They're in an area of Hollow Earth where just time just completely is displaced. You have Kurt Russell, who is this older man now, and even though they were the same age, and he doesn't want to see her, so he's like hiding behind a tree. And then when he does reveal himself, he has to explain this to her, where she thinks she's only been down here for a couple of months. And it's like, no, you've been down here for decades. And it's actually a very like heartbreaking moment. Like that, both actors do a very, very good job. What is the actress's name that plays Keiko? Mary Yamamoto. She does a really, really good job at that reaction of realizing you've been down here for decades and you're just like, what is going on? And really before that, Kurt Russell's character has his own agenda of trying to basically plug up all of these little different portals around the world in order to make sure that there is no more crossover, that there is no more chance of somebody like Keiko going down there and getting lost, or that any other kaiju would come up. And so he kind of goes and veers off within his own separate path, which I liked. I liked the agenda of it, and I liked that he had good motivation for it. There were times where, he seemed like he was one of the good guys, and there was also times where he seemed like he was being a little bit devious, but really it all comes down to the fact that he went down there, couldn't find her, the program was shut down. They basically like took him off to some like retirement home. Like when he came back, everything was really strange and awkward, and they were trying to keep it under wraps, and he wasn't allowed to tell his story. And they basically were monitoring him all the time. He never got to fulfill his mission. His life was also ruined. There was no chance that he was going to be able to do anything. He didn't have any of the resources. He didn't know where to go. And so you could see how him linking up with the twins gave him the opportunity to do what he's always wanted to do, even though it wasn't quite their goal of just like, let's find our dad. He's like, no, let's shut this shit down. So That's why I think his character arc worked the best for me. But when it comes to some of the other characters, like there was a few of the Monarch scientist characters that I thought were just pretty annoying. Like I said, a lot of the dialogue was pretty cheesy, pretty corny, and just didn't work for me whatsoever. There were some side plots with their friend May, who was planning to betray that she was like working for Apex, but then she wasn't working for them, and there was like a twist, but then a not twist, and some of that felt like it was padding, to get to 10 episodes. Maybe this would have worked better if it was like 6 episodes or something like that. But it whatever. It didn't bother me really, but it just kind of felt at times that there was little tangents and little side plots and little subplots that just kind of really felt like they were there just to kind of keep the pace going, keep the time of the episode up, that there wasn't enough information in the main story to keep it going. So it's like we have to add in a few more things. And then when it comes to the kaiju stuff, particularly the Godzilla stuff. Okay, so like I said, Godzilla is not in this show very much. If you're going into it because you're like, let's see a Godzilla TV show, well, it's kind of adjacently a Godzilla TV show. It takes place, in that world, in the Monsterverse. Godzilla does show up a few times, but I will say every time Godzilla does show up, it's a pretty impactful moment. They do one scene where he rises up out of the desert that is very reminiscent of Godzilla vs. Mothra, the original, but the CGI in the scene is done really, really well. And I love the whole sequence too, because they're there and they finally see their father from across the way, and he's like, get the fuck out of here. You don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, what? Like they think he's waving at them, but he's like, get the fuck out. And then Godzilla starts to rise up, and I love how like there's a little helicopter that's flying too close and it like hits Godzilla's spikes and everything. They do a lot of really cool stuff with that. So there's that scene. There was the scene on the bridge that they recreate in episode 1. There was the scene where you get to see the H-bomb go off in the 50s with Godzilla. And then, of course, there is the final episode where they are trying to escape from the Hollow Earth dimension that they're in. And it's this big climactic sequence when they're trying to get the ship or the pod or whatever. It looks like a Saiyan space pod. It's like a sphere, but it's a little bit bigger than a Saiyan space pod, but kind of similar. I don't know. I kind of like that. They were trying to get it working, and there was this dragon kaiju thing that looked pretty cool. I feel like it should have been a little bit bigger, but it still looked pretty cool. That was attacking them during the time. Just at the same time, Godzilla comes down, and Godzilla apparently knows where all these portals are, and he can kind of go back and forth because Godzilla just does whatever the fuck he wants, man. So he comes down there, and there is finally 10 episodes in a kaiju fight, but it is very quick. It's over in like a minute or a minute and a half, but it is pretty awesome while it happens. Godzilla, like I said, the CGI is actually shockingly done very, very well, and Godzilla's pretty brutal in the fight. Like, it actually kind of works to the benefit that they can't do too much of the special effects in CGI, because it forces Godzilla to be extremely brutal in the fight, where he just takes out this dragon in like a minute and a half. Like, he's not fucking around. I know the fight is short because of budget, but watching it in context, like in universe, the fight seems short because Godzilla's just like, nah, son, I'm just going to kill you. Like, I'm not playing around. I'm just going to kill you. So it works both ways. Kurt Russell's character does have to sacrifice himself, perhaps a little bit cliche, as they escape, but he did fulfill what he was trying to do from the very beginning, after having, decades of his life ripped away and then his story silenced and not being able to do something for so long. I like the fact that he was able to redeem himself. He was able to find Keiko. He was able to save her. And with the love triangle I was talking about, so in the beginning of the flashbacks, it seems like Shaw and Keiko are going to be an item, but Keiko actually starts to fall for the other character, John Goodman's the younger version of John Goodman's character. I should know these characters' names. I'm sorry. Bill Randa. Okay, Bill Randa. So she starts to fall for him, and Shaw is sort of forced to watch this from a distance, but there's no bad blood, happening. It's just that's who she happens to fall for. Like, it just worked out better that way for both of them. It wasn't like they were in a established relationship. She didn't cheat on him. Nothing like that happened. It just, there was a little bit of a chemistry and a romance building, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then she fell for somebody else, but he still had that, admiration for her. He still had that respect for her. And when she was lost, within the Hollow Earth, he spent all of these years feeling semi-responsible that he wasn't able to find her. So the fact that he was able to find her, that he was able to save her, it was more about just, I feel responsible for this person. Speaking of the other character too, the younger version of John Goodman's character, it actually is even more tragic for him because of the way that he dies in Kong Skull Island, where he's just killed off kind of, very, very simply, because he, does fall for this character. He loses her. All the research is scrapped. Nobody wants to do anything that he is trying to fulfill. That's how you see in Kong Skull Island, he's so adamant about going to this island, and it makes sense now connected to this show that all the research was just kind of abandoned and nobody really cared, as well as him losing the girl that he loved, that he also kind of became a father figure for her son. And it's just like, yeah, it makes you feel even more tragic for his character knowing the full context now. The one thing I was really upset about is that there was really no reference to Dr. Serizawa, who would be alive at this point because it's in between Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters. There might have been like an offhanded line about him, but I don't remember it. I don't remember it being in the show. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I was really surprised that he wasn't, I'm not surprised he didn't show up in the show, because paying for all these bigger name actors, that's just more of the budget taken away. So I'm not surprised that Ken Watanabe didn't show up, but Serizawa is a very big figure within Monarch, and the fact that he wasn't really, discussed or talked about was kind of strange for me. And then, of course, in the final episode, when they come out of Hollow Earth, the time displacement did happen, and they were gone for 2 years. So now in the chronology of the show, it's in 2017. So we're still in between, Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters. But they do come back on a base in Skull Island that has been established, and we do get to see Kong in the final seconds of the show, which is fun to see. I mean, obviously, it all takes place in the same universe, but it's nice that they actually were able to kind of throw Kong in there just to say, like, hey, there he is too. Like, we didn't forget about him. Kong is here. So, overall, I'm glad that I watched it. I think it had some good moments in it, some good performances by particular characters, but there were definitely moments that really, really dragged for me. I wasn't super invested with the main cast. I was more invested in the flashbacks and the past timeline of what was going on there. And, like I said, there's not a lot of kaiju stuff in it. They do make an attempt to put other monsters in it. I mean, we get to see different creatures. There was like the ice creature that we saw in episode 3, and the dragon, which was pretty cool. Godzilla shows up a few times, but the screen time, is 95% on the human characters the entire time, and it's about them, uncovering the mystery of all of these portals and where they're at and what happened in the past and stuff like that. So, it's it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I'm sitting here thinking I now live in a world where there's a live action TV show that features Godzilla starring Kurt Russell. And that's just crazy cool to me. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe if I'm doing like an extensive rewatch of, all of the Godzilla material that's out there. But I think that I enjoyed it enough that I don't regret watching it. I think it had some decent moments. I think the last 2 episodes, I think, are legitimately great. I think it had some good performances. And when they did use Godzilla, I thought they used him well and made it pretty impactful. And I was very impressed with the special effects and CGI, probably because they were so limited with it, but they made it look good. So, I don't know. If you guys have seen the Monarch TV series, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Overrated, underrated? Leave all your thoughts down there. I think overall, I might give it like a 6 out of 10. Maybe like a 6 out of 10. Because it had enough good in it that there were things that I really enjoyed, but I don't really find it to be rewatchable. Obviously there wasn't enough Godzilla in it for me, and some of the characters were just kind of meh. Some of the dialogue was just kind of meh, but the good moments were really good. So I'll probably give it somewhere around a 6. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a thumbs up and a comment. Let me know all your thoughts down below. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I have a Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, and all the social media links where you can follow me down below in the description. Other than that, guys, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.